And there is some other breaking news.
Some U.S. government agencies and corporations were hacked,
affecting the Treasury Department and a unit of the Commerce Department.
As Australian businesses and governments are being targeted.
What's shaping up to be a global cyber crisis.
It's a wider campaign. There may be more government agencies affected.
I mean, based on what we know and what we don't know,
cybersecurity experts don't have a real sense yet.
They look like users of the system.
As a sophisticated state-based actor, he's
actions of a state-based actor.
We need to look to a better and more coordinated multilateral response.
Cyber attacks must be treated as a serious threat.
Cyber attacks must be considered as a serious threat. If you have ever been to any of our CPX events in the past, you probably know that Yaniv and I like to talk to you about new research projects that we did, new hacks, new attacks, and so on.
Right, but 2020 was a very different year. It was different in so many ways, but for us, there was one more very special thing about it. This is the year when one of the biggest cyber events that we've ever seen in our career, and maybe the biggest cyber event that ever took place.
So while we could talk to you about Sigrid, Achilles, InstaHack, or Alexa Hack project, this year we've decided to talk to you about SunBurst.
SunBurst, well, you know, so much has been told about SunBurst tech. Yet, from many of our conversations, we understand that either people don't completely understand the implications of SunBurst, or they get lost in all the data.
There has been so many articles, publications, news shows about it, and so many terms thrown to the air that it's not surprising people get confused.
So today, we want to use this opportunity to once and for all put some order into things and make sure you understand just as well as we do.
In this presentation, we're going to take you through the attack, step by step, and to cover all of the above terms in a way that will make perfect sense to you. And we will start with the very first and easiest one, SunBurst, the official and most commonly used name given to this entire attack.
But as always in our field, names can be confusing. Different vendors like to choose different names for exactly the same thing, and this case is no different, when Microsoft chose to call it SolariGate. But anyway, don't let that confuse you. Whenever you hear the term SunBurst or SolariGate, just remember that it's exactly the same thing. That's the name of this entire attack.
Since attacks happened, and since they have a beginning and an end, it makes perfect sense for us to tell you the story from start to finish.
That's right, but keep in mind that although this is the correct chronological order, that's not exactly how things unfolded in reality. We'll touch more about that when we go on.
For now, we've prepared this timeline for you. That is going to stay with us throughout the presentation. Whenever we will discuss a new event, you will see it in the place on our timeline. And our story begins with a company called SolarWinds. SolarWinds is a leading IT services and monitoring software company based in Austin, Texas. The company was reported to have more than 300,000 clients. The vast majority are Fortune 500 companies. Orion Platform is the leading SolarWinds product designed to simplify IT administration for on-premise, hybrid, and SaaS environments. We are not exactly sure when it happened, but somewhere between September and October 2019, SolarWinds was breached by unknown attackers. There are many assumptions as to how exactly they were breached. Password guessing, through a modified software, and others. But for the purpose of our story, the only thing that matters is that they were indeed breached. And that puts the first bullet on our timeline, the SolarWinds breached.
Now, what's really important to remember here is that the SolarWinds breach was still not detected at this time, which means the attackers could practically do whatever they wanted inside the networks. While we do not know the full extent of the activities the attackers took within the SolarWinds networks, we do know one thing for certain, and that is the fact that the attacker managed to reach the Orion Platform build environment. You see, their goal was to try and implant malicious code directly into the product. And they did so in a very sophisticated way, something that kind of identifies these attackers throughout the entire attack. You see, they are using very strong operational security, also referred to as OPSEC methods, and they know exactly how defenders work, and they know how to do their malicious deeds without being detected. You see, in this case, they had several options to insert their malicious code within the build process. And while they could simply modify the source code directly, they chose not to do so, since it might raise a lot of suspicion. Instead, they chose to have the build server insert the code for them, and in a very small and progressive method, one change at a time, so that anyone who inspects the source code itself would see no change at all, while at the end, the product still contains whatever malicious code the attackers intended for. So now you're probably wondering, what exactly did the attackers modify in the source code? They again chose a very sophisticated way to remain undetected. Every installation of the Orion product will now generate a request to a unique subdomain, so that each victim will connect to his own subdomain. And once the initial connection has been made, the attackers examine the data in this request, which is revealing the identity of the victim. And if the victim is of no interest, a kill switch will be initiated, and the attack will stop immediately, leaving no further traces. However, if the victim is relevant, a second stage payload will be downloaded and executed on the victim. This second stage payload is commonly referred to as teardrop or raindrop, and basically it allows the attackers to perform any action inside their victim's network, including execution of many manual tools such as Cobalt Strike Beacon, DS internal suits, and many others. And this puts the next item on our timeline, which is the Orion source code modification, which happened at October 19th, 2019.
So now we know that the attackers were looking to modify SolarWinds source code. This is an attack commonly referred to supply chain attack. What is a supply chain attack, Yaniv? According to Wikipedia, attacking a less secure element in the supply chain in order to damage a target. And this is how it happens. An attacker wants to attack some target, but this target is too secured and it's very hard for him to do so. So instead of directly attacking his target, he chooses to attack someone that supplies something to his target. This someone should be far less secure and easier target to attack. And by attacking it, the attacker now managed to reach his final goal and his original target. It's important to note that supply chain attacks are not something new, and some were made public in the recent years, like Target and NotPetya. And that puts the next item on our timeline, at March 20. The modified SolarWinds product has been bundled and shipped out to SolarWinds clients. Every SolarWinds client now receives what appears to be completely legitimate and signed update for their products, which completely unknowingly also install the teardrop and raindrop implants in their networks, making them the possible next target for this attack.
And now you're probably wondering how many victims were actually affected by this attack. Well, we don't have a conclusive answer for this, but the short answer is a lot. You see, according to DNS data observed to the malicious subdomains, we can see evidence of somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000 victims actually connecting, which means they have received the first stage payload. Now, were all of them relevant, and did the attackers decide to activate the kill switch? It's very hard to tell. But the fact is that many of these originate from the government networks, security vendors, and Fortune 500 companies. So you can probably assume that at least some of them were found to be relevant by the attackers. And now, fast forward 8 months into the future. A very big security vendor called FireEye have reported their networks to be breached. Well, at first, it seemed like an isolated case. Many media stories actually took the attention and stole it by talking about some leaked hacking tools from the FireEye's Red Team arsenal. Well, first, we must tell you that when inspecting these tools that were allegedly leaked, we found that all of them are either open sourced or can be easily obtained in the internet, raising suspicion that this was not the original reason for the attack. What turned out to be very true when it became clear the FireEye was attacked using the SolarWinds backdoor and as part of the SunBurst attack. Now, the extent of activities the attackers conducted inside FireEye's network still remains unknown. However, we do know that the attackers successfully managed to breach FireEye's Office 365 account, exposing all its data, including internal emails, accounts, and possibly client emails to the attackers. And here, we see once again the extent of OPSEC taken by the attackers. You see, there are dozens of ways to reach one's Office 365 account. However, our attackers decided to use a SAML golden ticket. And without going into the technical details of what exactly is a SAML golden ticket, you can just consider it as some kind of golden key for entering into Office 365 account while remaining virtually undetected and without leaving any traces behind. And this puts the next item, the first publicly known item, and the one that actually started the entire SunBurst investigation worldwide on 8th of December 2020 with the FireEye breach.
So, FireEye were hacked. But what does it actually mean? And why did such advanced attackers want to attack FireEye in the first place? The answer to that is not completely clear yet. It might be that FireEye were indeed the target, but it's also possible that they were just another link in the chain. Shortly after FireEye disclosed the attack details, many US agencies have publicly confirmed they were affected by this attack. And we are not talking about just any government agencies. We're talking about US Treasury, Homeland Security, Defense, and Commerce Department. The extent of the damage caused to this US agency was never disclosed. This is not a coincidence, and at the moment, there are two leading assumptions as to how were these agencies attacked. The first assumption, they were attacked the same way FireEye was, since they used SolarWinds product as well. The second assumption is that the attacker chose FireEye since these agencies are their client, making this a double supply chain attack. But either way, this puts the next item on our timeline, which is the reported breach of these major US agencies at December 14.
And now, one more important event that happened in our timeline is the discovery of CVE 2020-14005. Now, if you're not familiar with the term CVE, then it refers to a public vulnerability report. And this one is in, well, yeah, you guessed it, the Orion platform. Well, this vulnerability allows anyone with access to the management console of the Orion platform, whether or not he has the correct credentials to it, to gain full control over the server which it is installed on. This CVE was reported to have been used in the wild, and following its exploitation, attackers would install a web shell backdoor in the network, referred to as Supernova. Now, if you're thinking that something just doesn't add up here, well, you're probably right. Why would an attacker that already has a backdoor in Orion platform need another vulnerability and a less accessible one? Well, this question, along with recorded attacker actions and other data, leads most of the research organizations to believe the attackers behind Supernova are not the same ones behind SunBurst, and that the discovery of Supernova simply happened because the product was re-reviewed by thousands of suspecting eyes. So we'll place it in our timeline for a reference, but keep in mind that most probably this vulnerability might just belong to a whole different story.
So, we showed you that this attacks has 8,000 victims, but let's try to put some faces and damages behind them. And who better to showcase the impact of the attack than the software giant Microsoft. Microsoft were one of the first reported victims and one of the most active ones in terms of research and forensics action taken. They have initially published a report stating that yes, we were using SolarWinds, and yes, we were attacked, but we couldn't find any evidence of the attackers doing anything in our network. A statement that quickly changed just a few days after. We confirmed the attackers had access to parts of our internal source code. However, this was read-only access. So think about it. If even Microsoft, with all their power and resources, were having such a hard time identifying the attackers' activities, what does it mean for other victims? What does it mean if someone managed to read Microsoft source code? And can this official statement ever change again? So, one of the most significant parts of this attack is now on our timeline as well. The Microsoft breach public report at 31 December 2020.
And now to one of the biggest questions of them all. Who else? Well, based on open source intelligence, network artifacts, and community research, several other big names have surfaced as being victims of this attack. Meaning the second stage payload has been delivered to them and the attackers were present in their networks. Among these names, some of the biggest security, network, IT, and hardware companies like Cisco, Intel, Nvidia, HP, Belkin. One of the most peculiar cases of them all is a public report made by a security vendor called Malwarebytes. In the report, they mentioned that they were attacked as well, and that the behavior they found in their networks perfectly aligns with the one they see on other victims. However, one thing stands out. They don't have and never had SolarWinds installed in their networks. The way the attackers managed to breach their networks and the implications of this are still unclear.
So, to conclude, we hope you now clearly understand the story. And above all, understand that this story holds more questions than facts. Who were the attackers? Why did they attack? Who were the victims? What did the attackers do in their networks? Yes, many reports were pointing to Russia, and while it does sound logical and has a reasonable chance being true, we don't think this is certain in any way, or at least we have still not seen conclusive evidence to suggest that. But what is absolutely sure is that with so many questions left unanswered, this attack is going to stay with us for the months and years to come. It is truly a landmark in the cybersecurity domain and one that should be closely studied and analyzed.
Our best advice at the moment is that anyone should consider himself as being a victim of this attack. Take nothing for granted. Reevaluate all your security controls. Look under every rock. Don't leave anything to chance. Whether you think so or not, whether you like it or not, you might also be a part of this attack. You see, we at Check Point have taken major steps and invested many resources on analyzing this attack and our security controls, and we strongly advise anyone else to do the same. And perhaps the most frightening part is the fact that this attack was discovered almost by mistake after 8 months of uninterrupted activities. If this attack was out there, can there be others? Now, let's all take this as a lesson and allow this attack to make us better, stronger, and more secure than ever before. This is our motto, and we hope it's yours as well.
Thank you.